Greetings and welcome to the pod. My name is Mark West. Rolf Hutt is a hydrological scientist from Delft University of Technology. Or he's perhaps better described as a MacGyver scientist, attacking problems from different and interesting angles. One such problem was the infamous 1962 escape from Alcatraz, in which inmates Clarence Anglin, John Anglin, and Frank Morris escaped from Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary by tucking papier-mâché versions of their heads into their beds, escaping their cells through ventilation ducts, climbing through an unused utility corridor, across roofs and fences, before leaving the island on an improvised inflatable raft made of rain jackets. Rolf helped build perhaps the most sophisticated model of the currents in the Bay Area on the night of the escape to look at the question of whether the inmates could possibly have survived the journey, and then tested the research in his own Mythbusters-esque escape from Alcatraz. This is super cool, and this combination of modelling, science communication, and ocean swimming is really in my wheelhouse, so I loved this chat with Rolf, and I started by asking him what made him think to model the famous escape from Alcatraz.
So the way I always tell the story is that what I bring to this is my expert skill in sitting on the couch and eating potato crisps. Because yeah, I'm not an ocean swimmer in that sense. So when I was a student, I used to watch a lot of Mythbusters.
Yep.
And somewhere in the first season, they escape from it. They recreate the escape from Alcatraz to see if it could be done under perfect circumstances. And that always stuck in my mind. And you talked about the MacGyvering a little bit. The one thing that the Mythbusters taught me as a student was that it's okay to, if you have an idea about how something should work, or you have an uncertainty or whatever, you just have an idea that you can look it up in literature. Someone probably did an experiment. But you can also just build something in your garage and do it yourself.
Have a go.
Which is way more fun.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more rough and requires more duct tape, but it is more fun. And so I'm very grateful for Mythbusters as an influence on my career. But fast forward about 15 years, and I walk into the office of my fellow academic college mate, Olivier Hoes, doctor engineer Olivier Hoes, who's an expert in the way water moves in lowland areas, polar areas, delta areas. And I just walk into his office. I mean, I literally walk into his office to ask if he has some duct tape lying around. And he just says, yeah, it's somewhere there, but whatever. But look at my screen. And what he has on his screen is the Bay Area with all kind of vectors going back and forth in the water. Okay, what am I looking at? And he explains that he modeled the way that the water moves in the Bay Area using a state-of-the-art, not too fancy, but state-of-the-art model that takes into account tidal information, bathymetry, and then even water coming from the Sacramento River, and then calculates the way the water moves, water heights and velocities, all in the Bay Area. And he used that to simulate what would happen with a 0, 20, 50, 100 centimeter sea level rise. Would that mean that every tidal cycle Embarcadero would flood, or etc.? So, or would it just mean on spring tides? It's very relevant from a climate change point of view and a scientific point of view. All I could see was like the little island, and I like got that memory of Mythbusters. It was like, whoa, if you can do this for the future, can you do this for historic events as well? Like, yeah, if you just give me historic data, I'll run it. Yeah, I'll just force it with that. So we did that. And then basically we had the way that the water moves and the water levels. And then we contacted an academic friend, Fedor Baert, who is in Deltares. Deltares is we call it a knowledge institute. So they do academic research, but they're not necessarily training students, but they're very close to academia. Their assignment in the landscape is to make sure that academic knowledge gets to society. And so one of the things that Fedor does, among many things that he does, he's a brilliant in-betweener between water science, computer science, psychology. I mean, he has a lot of skills. So I admire that guy. So, but he does models that track, given how water moves, that track where particles might end up, or back calculate if we found something here, where could it have come from? And in these kind of Lagrangian models, and these are very relevant for oil spills, but we're using them for currently a lot of interest goes to where does the plastic and other contaminations that we put out from rivers, where does that end up in our ocean systems? He can use those models, and he's good with visualizations. So we gave him the water model, and then he did the calculation where you say, okay, what if every half hour we release 50 floats from Alcatraz? Where would they end up? And we could even add a little bit of a vector to these floats, simulating but they're trying to swim in this direction.
I was actually going to ask you that question. So cool. So you can put that into the model as well.
Yeah, you can basically give a force vector to these floats, where you basically say the water will take you here, but you will try to go there, and then the net of that is where you end up. Which was funny, because then what we could study is, and what we also did, is what's the difference between aiming for the place you want to go with these very hard tidal cycles, because the water just gushes out in the Bay Area. So aiming for the northern head of the Golden Gate Bridge versus aiming for Angel Island, which is kind of behind you, but if you keep swimming towards it, you could end up where you want to be.
Yep.
I don't know if these three inmates back in the day had that vector knowledge in their head. But it was funny as an exercise for us to see, like, what would be the optimal strategy given that you know what these tidal forces are.
Well, given what they did to get out of their cells, you wouldn't put it past them to have thought of some of these other things as well.
Yeah, but true. Just the one. The other two were mainly muscle.
Right. Yep.
And as far as, I mean, this is all, if you look at the data uncertainty in the whole chain of this Alcatraz story, the tidal records are pretty accurate.
Right. Yep.
And I trust the modeling of the water and the floats. The anecdotal evidence from inmates about how smart the other inmates are has a bigger uncertainty on it.
Yes,
so
the mythology
I would
of
take that with a grain
would,
of. Yeah, so maybe some people will be offended if I call their former relatives, former inmates, just muscle. I don't know. But yeah, if they had, they wouldn't have access to these models. They didn't exist back then. Not as sophisticated as this. There was, and we had this documentary, which is part of the story that comes later. We had there is a scale model of the Bay Area in Marin, so just north of San Francisco, on the northern side of the Golden Gate Bridge. So yeah, where Sausalito also is. And I think it's a 1:100 vertical and a 1:1,000 horizontal scale model. So it's multiple football fields where they actually model the entire Bay Area.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then had huge pumps, and then they could and it was because they had an idea to totally dam off the northern part of the bay to create a freshwater reservoir and a marine base. And it was an insane 50s engineering idea. But just for that, they built that scale model. So the knowledge about how these water flows around the island moved in a given tidal cycle were available, just not as a computer model.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think they would have known that, but you could clearly see that if you knew we should be swimming in this direction,
Yep.
then you could end up, etc. Which is also, I mean, the way. So we did this as kind of a, not as a joke, but as an interesting side project to our normal scientific projects. And then we, as scientists, we share our knowledge on like conferences, in papers and whatever. But conferences is one of the main venues for us to share our knowledge with each other. And we were going to go to a conference in San Francisco anyway. It's an annual conference for most of Earth Sciences, the American Geophysical Union's fall meeting. And what you then normally do is you just submit what we call submit an abstract. So you basically say, this is the kind of work I've been doing lately, which I want to share. I've done connect this supercomputer to this model, and it shows this on climate change, and I should share it with you. And then they'll say, oh, that's nice. You'll get poster slot number so many, or you get an oral talk at this hour. And you can have multiples of these abstracts, not too many. And we were like, well, okay. So we'll put our normal research, we'll put that in, but we'll put the Alcatraz stuff in somewhere as well. And then we did that. And then, to their credit, on the Friday before we flew out, I got a call from the BBC. And they're like, we went through the abstracts. I was like, whoa, that's like 25,000 of them.
Wow.
You must have a good algorithm. We spotted your work and we think it has media interest because Escape from Alcatraz.
Yeah.
So we want to run a story on it. Are you okay with that? So I was like, hell yeah. That's fun. So they did a short interview, and they got on there, but they posted it on their website on I think the Sunday or Saturday that we arrived, and Monday the conference was about to start. And if I've learned anything from this process, is that the main source for news for journalists is other journalists.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But the moment that the BBC said scientists have done the Alcatraz escape and they could have made it or they couldn't have made it, that moment, instantly, everyone else wanted to cover it as well. Yeah. So again, to his credit, Fedor kind of saw this coming. So we prepared some like press materials to make sure that we could cover the story from the angle that we wanted. Mm-hmm. The angle that we wanted is like, okay, this is a fun side project where we're using these models that are also very usable in designing deltas, calculating impact of climate change on coastal regions. So we could have that focus on there, which succeeded, which I think also from a scientific communication point of view proved important, which is something where we don't talk about a lot, is that people that read the news and ingest science news don't care about your institution. I mean, the difference between two universities that are 10 kilometers apart, they don't care. Yep. They just care about the cool news or the thing that you do. And only the people in your field know, oh yeah, from that institute, and it's a pretty prestigious and blah, etc. So we made sure that in all our communications, because we were doing this with at least two institutes, we had a conscious decision to focus and communicate Dutch water scientists. So that the media angle for this and that what would resonate was like, people in the Netherlands know how to do water science.
Yeah, sure.
And that was good enough for us in a general communication sense. And the experts that needed to reach us based on this story and based on this would know where to search anyway.
Yep.
And I think if you see a lot of press releases from universities and knowledge institutes, the ones writing the press release get career progression for how many times the institute is named.
Right. Yes.
Which is not that important. It's of course it's way harder to measure. Did you get more follow-up research? Did you get more renown? Whatever. Based on these actions is way harder to measure than just counting the amount of times your names get used. But just pushing that names actually makes the news less readable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we had a whole week of that, of like interviews, and I think as a scientist in that week, we've reached more people than any of my articles will ever do. I mean, don't get me wrong, the articles that we do are intended to reach a very specific audience, and to either follow up with follow-up research, or they're intended to reach policymakers to make decisions on. But just on the sheer numbers,
Yep.
I think Fedor at some point made an overview of the major news outlets and multiplied that by the average amount of viewers for the news outlet. He got something like 500 million people heard about Dutch people from Dutch water scientists redid the Alcatraz escape.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was wild. Well, so then we got back in the Netherlands after that wild. It was a wild week. Actually, I actually got to. This is a weird story. I actually got to meet Adam Savage in that week as well, because Twitter was going wild.
Yep.
And then at some point he jumped in and he said, like, oh, in your analysis, you're saying that they die after 4 hours of hypothermia, but we've actually did it, and you're sweating your ass off, so you'll survive way longer. I was like, this is one of my childhood heroes. I was like, you're in San Francisco, right? Yes. Lunch.
Why not?
And we on purpose didn't tell the PR people from our universities, because they would have jumped on that as a opportunity. So we just had, like, in a low key taqueria.
That's amazing.
We just, like, the three scientists of us and him, we just shared, and we immediately dove into how this little boat was made out of raincoats and how the water was. And yeah, that was amazing.
Well, they say never meet your heroes, but it sounds like this actually do meet your heroes in this case.
In this case, I had a positive experience.
Great.
So that was really good. And so we got back home, and a few weeks later, I got a phone call from a guy from the States that says, I'm doing a documentary series on the escape from Alcatraz. I'm like, it's part of a series, Mysteries of the Death, people that have died or in mysterious circumstances, etc. It's for NPR, so it's not Fox News. And so it's a serious documentary, but it's for a general public. We want to do the Alcatraz escape because we don't know what happened to these people. Heard about your research, you want to be part of this. Sounds fun. Let's do this.
Amazing.
Yes, and I've had that experience working on a documentary on some other subjects in the Netherlands before. And what usually happens is, what they do is they'll just interview you a few times to get the story straight, and then they hire better looking people to tell about it on camera. It's television. So in the second meeting, like, this was online meetings. In the second meeting, Stephen, he was like, could you look at the tidal cycles for this year when the tide is exactly the same as it was in 66, 62 when that happened? So, yeah, sure. So, yeah, because then we can, like, plan the shooting week and get your ticket so we can get you here. And then wait, what? So they flew us in and they had us make historically accurate boats from historically accurate raincoats. And then got us to Alcatraz, and we did a lot of documentary shots on Alcatraz at night when the public was gone, so it was completely empty and spooky.
Scary as well.
Yes. And then at exactly the right time, they had us go, like, in our homemade little raft, jump off from Alcatraz and pedal. And it's weird. So the way the thing works, they made a raft out of raincoats, because This is something for the bureaucrats. Um, they counted everything. They didn't count the raincoats. They just assumed use, the law says. So what these guys would do, they would get 2 raincoats when they walked out during their air hour, their free hour. They just get 2 raincoats on. Then when the guards weren't looking, they would put one off and put them in their pants or something, and then they walk back in and they hand one back in.
Yep.
And so they get a stack of raincoats. And there was another story where they were part of the crew that was allowed out on top of the cell block, which the cell block sits within the bigger structure, to do some maintenance and painting work. And so they built themselves a little workplace there out of sight of the guards. And they used glue that they stole from the shoemaking activity that they had, and then raincoats that they stole to make themselves a raft. We had to use the same materials, but it means so basically we made 3 tubes as a structure and then a bottom, but it's all floppy.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went in, Fedor, who's the largest of us, was basically going in first and then pushing his arms out. So he would be like the structural element of this boat. Olivier, who's the most physically fit one of us, would be sitting in the front of the triangle, paddling. We had a wooden paddle, paddling, and I would be sitting in the middle. And we had some garden hose because these tubes they're not meant as watertight. So I mean, you do the best you can get. They're not perfectly airtight. So I had garden hoses to constantly re-inflate these tubes. I've been like pumping for 90 minutes in these garden hoses while Olivier is pedaling. You have muscles here? I mean, again, I'm not an ocean swimmer. I didn't know existed until I did that. We had the luck, which they had as well back in the day, that it was gorgeous weather. So, I mean, if you would have a stormy situation, we just calculated water movement, ignoring most of the wind.
Mm-hmm.
But if you would have storm level winds, then the drag force on the boat would be such that it would have a significant influence
Yep.
on where you would end up. That was not a thing on the night that they went, and luckily for us, it was also not a thing on the night that we went. And we just paddled, and it was absolutely gorgeous. At some point, Olivier stopped paddling, and he said, "Guys, wait, look around.
Let's have a look." Yeah.
It was like the Bay Area from the water. I mean, as an ocean swimmer, you may like know this. It's absolutely stunning. And this was at night, so you could see the island in the light and the Golden Gate in the light. And then he said, "We're getting paid for this."
Did you try to aim at a particular point, or did you just go with the currents?
No. If you go with, so that was what our research show. If you go with the current, you get sucked out.
Right.
And what you want to have, and that's what we aimed for. What you want to have is that you have the inversion point,
Yep.
like tidal slack point. You want to hit that under the Golden Gate Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the closest part, and then you can get to the shore there. But you want to be as much to the north in that stream as possible. So you want to go perpendicular to the main current and aim maybe even a little bit back. And that would get you to the north pillars of the Golden Gate Bridge. There's a little marina there, Horseshoe Bay, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's been a while. But yeah, so that's what you want to do. If you just go with the flow, you just get in the center of the stream, and either you end up in the Pacific, or if you're lucky, you get at that slack tide point, the inversion point, and then you get pushed back into the bay. And then it really depends where in the stream you are at that point. If you're a little bit to the north, then you end up in the North Bay. If you're a little bit to the south, you end up close to San Francisco. if you're straight in the middle, you just get pushed back to Alcatraz.
Right. Yep.
And so it's kind of like a chaotic system where a little deviation in where you are at that point has a very large influence on where you end up.
And you made it.
Not spoiling. Well, I'm spoiling the outcome of the documentary. We got pulled out by the rescue diver within like 20 meters of the coast, because there's a safe harbor entry that we aimed for, and then there's all the rocks that they use as a base for the Golden Gate,
Mm-hmm.
and we just overshot the safe harbor entry,
Right. Okay.
and then all the safety and security guy and insurance people were like, oh,
Yes.
whoa, 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 whoa. We were like, no, we can make it
We
there, and
still
they were
counts.
like, yes, but you'll die. I think if you're an inmate fighting for your life, you would just go for these rocks and
Yes,
climb
you'd
out.
go. Yeah.
Um, but uh, but they were like, no, 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 we're pulling you out now. We don't want to drag you off these rocks and into a hospital.
Yeah. But it's cool because it's exactly what your model said to do as well.
Yes, the fact that these models are so accurate helps with a few things. It gives you confidence in the kind of predictions you make. But I think it's also very important that you see that there is, for example, the where would something end up if it just floats? You have
Hmm.
that inversion point. The slight disturbance in where you are greatly influences, do I get all the way in the South Bay, or do I get all the way up in the North Bay? And even if your model is perfect, it's just a inherent chaotic system,
Yep.
and you never know where your start position perfectly is. So this also gives us confidence in our limit to predictions and how we need to deal and communicate with that. But yeah, the fact that it fitted so well was really good.
And it's quite amazing that the model suggested, and then you repeated it by matching the tidal conditions on the day, that there was just this half an hour window, I think, that they could have left in. And that seems to match up when they might have actually left in 1962 as well. So there's a
Yeah,
chance.
yes, the window where they could have left in '62 is a lot. No, not a lot. Is somewhat wider. I,
Okay.
it's been a while, but top of my head, somewhere between 8 p.m. or 10, somewhere between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.
Okay.
Given when things like lights out and the amount of time it takes to get there, and if they just hit it at 11:30 ish, that would have been ideal, because then the tide would still be going out. They would have been sucked towards the Golden Gate, so they didn't have to swim all that distance. And then at the Golden Gate, they would have that inversion that would have pushed them back towards the shore.
That's amazing. So,
Oh yeah, but it's a lot of ifs and buts, and we've never seen them again.
yes, I know, but it adds to the myth, doesn't it?
I know. No, sipping margaritas in Mexico.
That's right. And didn't they find an ore on Angel Island or something like that?
Yeah.
And the model even shows that, the driftwood and your
Yes.
documentary too, I think.
Yeah, if you just like just drift, and then there's a fair chance that stuff ends up at Angel Island. It's one of the beaching locations for stuff that you would throw in Alcatraz at that time.
I went searching for the documentary and every link that I found that had it was blocked in Australia. So I don't know if it's still up or I'm
Yes,
just looking in the wrong spot.
you're just not American enough.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't really do much about
I, I
that.
think I think you can actually get a physical copy
Okay.
from Amazon or something. It's publicly available for people inside the US, because NPR has this like region blocking
Hmm.
thing, and that is because the rights have been sold to Discovery for Europe. I don't know what region Australia counts as for this purpose, but it's so here in Europe it's Discovery, which doesn't do a on-demand service for these kind of
Right. Okay. Okay.
documentaries. They just air it once in a while, which is weirdly annoying in the sense that you suddenly get text like, "Hey, you're on TV." Wait, what? I didn't know they would re-air this.
I hope you get some royalties every time they put it back on air.
No. Wow. As an academic, I have no complaints about my income. And this whole documentary, no, the whole research behind this documentary is done on public funding.
Yep,
I don't
sure.
I don't need royalties for that.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Plus, it's fun.
Oh yes. No, these are the like the cherries in the on the cake for the type of work we get to do.
Yeah.
I mean, the rest of when we're done, the rest of my day is answering emails, writing proposals, maybe write a paper,
Yep.
maybe doing a little bit of research myself.
Maybe.
Maybe. So escaping from prison is not on my day-to-day list of things to do.
And plus, you got to recreate the whole MythBusters thing, which is
Yes,
amazing.
it's amazing.
If you're a betting man, did they make it then, or no? What are we saying?
As a like from the water and purely engineering point of view, I'd be like yes,
So you think the craft might have held together from your experiences? Because that always seemed a
yes.
little interesting
The
to
craft
me.
might have held. The plan was good. The execution was good. However, if I look at it using input from colleagues in the social sciences and psychology, I would find it very unlikely that these three people stay off the radar while being alive for as long as they had.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the main argument why I'm afraid they might not have made it. But that's just using social sciences as an argument and psychology as an argument, not the engineering. The engineering points to they could have made it.
Yep. I get the feeling that all the data we're ever going to collect has been collected now. It's some time ago. They'd be old if we do happen to find them. It's unlikely we're going to discover a body. So I
Yeah.
think
No. Wow. Bones tend to last a long time underwater.
I guess.
But
Who
yeah,
knows?
finding random human remains off the coast of San Francisco, honestly, more likely mob and crime related
There's probably a
than
few
these
out there.
three, or just fishermen falling off deck, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah. And tracing that back, it's not like we had DNA or dental records or whatever back then.
Hmm. Hmm.
So finding, yeah, but maybe someone comes up with a forensic technology that we just haven't thought of yet that would shed light on it. Whether that would be a useful time, a useful spendage of academic time is another question.
No, yes. It's there might there might not be much more for us to learn in this situation, but it's fascinating. It really captures the imagination, and I love that it's a really interesting vessel for your science as well to sort of communicate the sort of work you're doing and
Yeah,
matching
yes, and
reality, and then
I think that is a very important lesson. So the so both towards the public, but also towards uh, internally us as academic institutes, the science we do, especially related to water engineering, climate change, has huge impacts on policy and on people's lives in the long run. But the day-to-day science we do is just not that catchy and interesting to communicate about, which doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You should do it to the right people, policymakers, stakeholders, uh, um, other scientists, and that's very, very important. But every now and then, when an opportunity comes along that has this mass media appeal, you should jump on it. And you should acknowledge that you're doing it because it's fun and it's a side thing and it's not your core business, but it's still a very great vessel to communicate your science to a broader audience than you would otherwise get the opportunity to.
mm, mm. I'm interested if you remember what the original study showed. Was San Francisco going to go underwater with a with a small amount of ocean increase?
There's I should look up the original study because I'm doing this top of my head.
Yeah,
So
of
if I
course. Yeah.
make slide, don't quote me on this. The city of San Francisco itself would be mostly okay because the difference in height between just the water level and the sea level is okay-ish. Even at high tide, there's still a somewhat room, but further upstream in the bay, and especially if you take that wave as it travels up to Sacramento, like the delta after Sacramento,
Hmm.
um, there's a few areas that very much mimic Dutch polder systems,
Okay.
where basically there's an embankment or a dike system, and then the land behind that is at or just below water level, and you actively need to pump control the water level to make sure just. And so those systems are under threat for increased climate change because of a few reasons. One of them is what we have here as well, is even if we make sure, which is going to be hard given climate change. I'm not optimistic about this, but even if we maintain our coastal defenses and our riverine defenses against like a meter of sea level rise, our land sits at, well, the deepest part sits at -5, -6, and we constantly pump out water. The water that comes, the water that we need to pump out, it's somewhat of that is rainfall, but most of that is actually groundwater
Coming up
that
through.
comes up. Because basically you have communicating vessels, like there's the ocean over there, you have all this uh, soil, sea, clay, sand part, and the water just pressures through that. So there's a negative groundwater pressure if you're below sea level. So it just wants to go up instead of wants to go down. And we need to pump that out and get that back in. If that if that pressure gradient gets higher, we get more of that. And we have to do a lot of engineering and tricks to make sure that the water that we're getting here comes from mainly land areas and not the sea, because then it becomes salty.
Then becomes salty. Yeah.
So and that's a whole area of research and engineering that happens outside the view of a lot of people, but it's a very big impact of climate change for low-lying areas.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that's huge for the Netherlands.
Yes, um, and we're working on it, like both adaptation mitigation. So one, fix climate change, try to minimize the impact, and two, engineer the hell out of it to make sure that whatever impact we're getting, we're surviving.
Yep. Yep. And you can see the. I can see how your modeling can influence that too. I mean, the sort of the tidal movement. Uh, what's it called? The Gulf Stream up in Europe is a very big influence of European weather, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you look at the tidal wave that basically on the North Sea just moves up the Rhine and other rivers in our delta, if we get like an increased level of that with climate change, you basically have a salt wedge because the salty water is heavier than the fresh water. So it sits lower in the river, but it just moves upstream and then moves down again, moves up again.
Hmm.
If that, with climate change, that would move further upstream, including to a few points where we now have the inlet of drinking water companies.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I mean, drinking water companies take river water and then take a whole lot of effort to purify that, because otherwise we'd be drinking basically filtered German piss. But well,
But yeah,
we have
yep.
that under control, but those installations are not meant to deal with salt seawater, or at least increase in salinity.
It doesn't feel like it'd be good for farmland either, or is that a bit further away
No,
from there?
no, it's not good for farmland either, for sure. No, so it has a whole range of impacts that we need to deal with somehow, or I need to make sure it doesn't happen. Although sometimes if reading the news, it feels like we're beyond that point. There's still a whole lot we can do to make sure it doesn't get as bad as it could become. But yeah, these models that we make help us predict what these impacts are going to be, what the effect is going to be of measures that we take. And only occasionally does it help us predict where historic inmates might have ended up.
So no prison wardens have got in contact for planning the next island prison.
No, I think we've moved away from building prisons. I mean, from a cinematic point of view, it was the best thing they could have ever done.
Yeah, that's
Having a
right.
prison on an island just off a major city, but I think we've moved away from that, as it's not
Yeah, I feel like that's a good thing.
logistically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
that's
not really
our
good in
story.
any way. Thank you very much to Dr. Rolf Hutt for such a fascinating tour of the modelling of the famous 1962 escape from Alcatraz. I guess we best leave it to you to form your own conclusions about whether they escaped and are still alive today. If you'd like any more information to help you on your own journey towards understanding this problem, then get over to the website at www.thepodpodcast.net. That's www.thepodpodcast.net. And up there I have links to all of Rolf's research, and if you're outside of Australia, you might be able to watch his video. Thanks heaps for listening. My name's Mark West, and I'll catch you next time on The Pod.